finished, South Clark at 50-foot lots, and when they got to build my street 2 years later, they wanted to squeeze an extra lot at the end, so they shaved 6 feet off of every lot rather, so we have 44. I can see some merit in adding a unit to an existing footprint, but in terms of adding new coverage, you're gonna have drainage issues perhaps. If you have a roof, you're gonna have runoff. I would be extremely hesitant, even the generous impervious coverage that we allow. 50% on a small lot is a lot of coverage, and that's a lot of runoff. And if this last week didn't bring that home, I mean, we dodged a major bullet here, except for a couple of streets that we anticipated. But adding ADUs, even if you're under the coverage, you could trigger some runoff onto adjoining properties, and we're gonna be dealing with this on a case-by-case basis. So, garage that's already there, the back porch that's already there, or a small addition that can be accommodated, it's worth looking at. But the chart on page 4 was interesting. If you can believe the numbers, the average square foot of living space needed for someone in 1950, so when I was a year old, it was 292 feet. So myself, my mom, and my dad, we lived in a Cape Cod house. It was a big tree home. It probably had 800 square feet, so we were right there. The same three-person, family today would need over 3,000 square feet according to this chart.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So, not that we need to go back to, living in Quonset huts, but it's, there's some merit in you've seen the show Tiny Houses. They can address a need, but we can't have one on every lot in Somerville.
I think,
because they're going to have to be on pontoons.
I think they have the potential to change the character of the neighborhood fairly dramatically. And, we approach this as a helpful item for people who want to keep their parents or single parent close by, or if it's elderly people living in the single family house, to keep a caregiver right there without having a caregiver actually living in the house. However, when the owner of that piece of property either sells it or dies and it goes to somebody else, the opportunity for an absentee landlord rears its head fairly quickly. So if there are enough of these things going on, it could be an issue.
That's one question I had for the attorney in terms of deed restriction on these units. I assume this would have to be done by ordinance. I would assume that we could put a deed restriction in there for family member and or caregiver, so that it can't become an instant studio apartment with a new owner.
That's what I would recommend, because your ordinance could say that these are the only types of uses in those ADUs that you would allow, caregivers, the elderly families, however, there's plenty of ordinances do that. And then the trend now, in order to make sure that any potential buyers are aware of what they're buying right up to that, is to put that deed restriction in, or record a copy of the resolution allowing that particular thing. So when the buyer comes in, title work is done, they know exactly what's going on, and you don't have a headache of someone coming in saying, well, wait a minute, it was already there, it was already there. They know right up front before they even go out the property what's going on.
That addresses my concern. You will put these in and just making them.
That's a good ownership.
It's a recommendation that may happen anyway, but at least we be.
At least that provides some control.
That's something to latch onto if they do.
Enforced by.
And when the for rent sign goes up, code enforcement has a way to come in and say, wait a minute, you're in violation.
Right.
The other thing too, we should be concerned with is additional parking too. In a lot of areas, that's a big factor.
Especially if, for instance, in my case, I have, my garage is an old carriage house, and it's probably close to 1,200 square feet if you consider both floors. I don't park any cars in there because it's at a bad angle, get in and out of. So I've never parked any cars in there. So, in my case, I could put an accessory unit there and not interfere with my parking at all. However, in a lot of cases, you can't do that.
Plus the extra car from whoever's living.
The extra parking, yeah, and that's
So I
what
think
the neighbors.
that's the other issue, right?
Yeah.
Is do we require extra parking for that requirements?
And then I have a similar situation, I have a 110-foot driveway.
Right.
But most people on my street don't like to stack the cars and then have to maneuver them. So
Right.
rarely do you have all your cars in the driveway. And if I were to convert my garage, let's say, and had someone, you know, family member, caregiver, whatever, that they can park in my driveway and move 4 cars to go to the store, I don't think so. They're gonna spill out onto the street. And then, you know, you multiply that by 2 or 3 or 4, and when you don't have a parking problem now, you soon
May
will.
very well.
You soon will.
I think the parking issue is probably going to be mitigated to a certain degree if we could deed restriction in requiring that a family member in the unit. Because if it's an elderly parent, they may not be driving, a lot. But we can always say that you have to provide, or be able to provide off-street parking for that unit.
Yeah, without swapping that off-street parking requirement for one of your own.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
But what happens when there's not a need for the additional 300? Person dies and it's deed restricted, now what? They have to tear down? Like if somebody buys, so it's a valid, useful.
Your kid's got a hangout place when he turns 16.
Well,
Yeah.
Once the units in the zoning board approved, the borough had that condition, that the application has to come out when the members no longer live in that family. The zoning board's already done that a few times.
The unit has to be removed.
Yes,
So the unit has to be removed, the kitchen has to be removed.
I think the unit has to be, the unit.
I don't know if I agree with that,
You
because
guys
I
take
think,
the garage down?
I think it adds value to the piece of property.
Right, but typically in-house, like the house has a section wing, separate wing, so technically it's a two-family, so the zoning board has said in the past, okay, that's fine. You have to do an affidavit, right, Tony, every year certifying that, and there's a condition in the resolution that says it has to be removed when the no longer being used by the family.
Question, if we go ahead and do this and set all this stuff up in an ordinance, does it go to the Board of Adjustment with the planning board?
1 and 2 family are site plan exempt, so the answer is the zoning board, but for planning purposes, I would like to see it stay here, so I'll have to think about that. I mean, that's another way of doing this, is to make it mandatory planning board review of it, and make sure it's appropriate. If the board, I just have to talk to Kara, and
You can't
do a site plan approval for 1 and 2 family. You can't. So.
That's an accessory dwelling.
But an ADU
unit, so
can
I
you?
wonder if we
I don't
could
know,
put that-
I have to deal with Kara on this. The issue is, if you craft these things and you want to look at them to make sure it's appropriate, it should be a planning board out, in my opinion, not the zoning board, which is quasi-judicial. So I have to deal with the accessory unit issue.
Yeah, unless they don't meet a condition, in which case they would have to go to the zoning board.
Right.
But that's what the case. They might have been granted.
Yeah, it's a sticky issue. We could also require that there be no additional construction or no new construction. You know, if you're gonna convert an existing garage on the same footprint, maybe. If you're going to separate a wing of a house, maybe. And that gets back to the concern that the lots are small and to put up an additional structure. You know,
So
some
then we're
lots.
also taking out in addition to the existing building then too. So you're talking existing garage, existing home that you're separating a wing, but no new structure and no new addition to the structure to create that separate wing.
So let me ask this then real quick. If I have a house and impervious coverage isn't a problem, I have a big lots of land, I can put an addition on my house tomorrow, do whatever I want with it, put a playroom in and another living room, whatever. If I wanted to build that as an ADU because, you know, my mother-in-law is sick, I'm gonna bring her to live there. I build it, I get the approval, you know, do whatever things we have to do for it. Are we saying that after I move out, actually that entire addition has to be undone?
That's where I'm getting a little confused,
No.
because why can't, you may wanna build it as an ADU, but then as your kids get
Convert
older,
it
then
to-
that's a new playroom for them, or a new, you know,
Right.
TV
What-
room, or
And so
whatever.
what changes it from an ADU to just an addition on my house? What would the modification?
Or the separate entry, maybe you
Yeah.
have to close up whatever separate
Yeah.
entry and take out the separate kitchen, so then clearly it becomes part of the home. And then you have to, you know, you can use it then for whatever.
So the same thing with converting a garage. If I had a garage right there and I wanted to convert it, afterwards, pull the kitchen out, and obviously there's already an outside door, so you're
Yeah.
keeping that.
I mean, the zoning board's approved additions to houses, a bedroom for a parent or something, but they're sharing the kitchen, so it's just an addition, a bedroom addition, it's not a separate unit per se.
So that sounds far more attractive
Yeah.
to do than to build a completely separate unit with the kitchen, and then
Yeah.
after Poppy goes to a better place, now I
You
gotta
pay
move the
to
kitchen.
move it.
Ah,
Yeah.
just share my kitchen, Poppy, we're good.
That's,
But that's their decision.
that's
Right.
right.
You know, if it's a condition, then they gotta decide financially or, you know, rationally, which one makes sense.
But they'd have to know that.
Well,
Well, they would, go into it.
I
That would be
can
part of
tell you
it.
from experience, Larry, it's not difficult to tear out a kitchen.
That's true.
Part of it.
It might hurt, ripping a kitchen out, you put it a year or 2 years before though.
When I bought my office building in 1978, it was a two-family house. There was an apartment upstairs and an apartment downstairs. And there are actually 3 exterior doors there. So the apartment upstairs used the front door, and the apartment downstairs used 2 other doors. And there was an emergency exit, there was a back stairwell in there, so the emergency, in an emergency, the upstairs apartment could exit through the downstairs apartment if need be. When I bought the place, I tore the kitchen out to make my office. The kitchen still exists upstairs, but I don't think I could put another kitchen in there, at least not the way the zoning is now. I couldn't rebuild that kitchen. And that's one of the things that this is a digression, but we're going to talk about this in September when we meet with the zoning board. We're going to talk again about the restrictions of the PORs on it and what we want to allow and what the zoning board has had to deal with. What is the date of that meeting?
October 20.
It's October? I thought it was September, but, okay.
And so, I have a question. So when, as we look at this, if someone has the appropriate amount of impervious coverage allowance, and someone can put a shed there that's 500 square feet, we would draw a line in the sand where he said, look, you can build your shed if it meets all the requirements, but you can't build a 500 square foot gate. Is that the direction? I mean, where,
You can't put a kitchen in
Can't
there.
put a
That's what
kitchen.
it basically sounds like.
so what's the concern there? Between, it sounded like impervious coverage was a concern, but at the end of the day, you have a concrete slab with a shed on it, or a shed with a kitchen, all right? So where do you draw that
Well,
line?
a 600 square foot shed is a big shed.
All right, 400 square feet, 300 feet, whatever the number is, like,
But it was, so that's another thing we need to decide. How big do we want this unit, these units to be? Do they
Not to exceed.
Well, not to exceed or not, at least a minimum. You know, I mean, do we want them to be the size of studio apartments?
They were saying 600 to 1,000 square feet is the average.
That's
well,
about
if
the
there's an
size of
existing
our average
structure,
studio.
if there's an existing structure, then we could take that into consideration, like you said, for the 1,000 square feet.
A 600 square foot unit is 20 by 30.
It's 25 square or 625.
You know, 20 by 30 unit, that's a big footprint, and I think there are going to be issues on this particularly on the smaller lots.
Yeah.
For sure. They've got a detached garage and the house and the driveway, and they're gonna be, so I think that the impervious coverage rules should be adhered to.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I agree.
Oh, I agree, that was one comment, I was just looking at it, if you can build one thing, what prevents you from building another, right?
Yeah, the difference is two families living there.
Yeah.
Or
To meet
two
other
sets of
requirements,
people.
right, parking, and,
Right.
Because with a shed, because you don't have, for the most part, you might have electric, but most likely not. Most sheds are not set up as workshops.
Yeah.
They're set up as sheds. I mean, I've seen a few that, you know, where the guys are woodworking or something like that, so they run a line out there, but
You don't have a bathroom.
For the
It's
most
not,
part,
it's not some, no one's living there, so it's standing out, no, okay, right, okay, I get it, I get it.
and there's no rental potential for a landlord to, you know, just run a small ad and say, you know, room with a view.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the concern really, if you just have, you know, you're gonna have a tent village of these things, and for some folks it's better than where they may be living now, but it's, the lots, I don't know what the average size lot, in some groups, there's a big span, you know, from a lot like mine to a lot that's like Tom Mitchell's, I mean, there's a lot in between, but there's a lot of lots my size, you know, 6,000, 7,000 square feet. I couldn't even put a barbecue pit on mine now, I'm right at the coverage line, with a small garage and a small back patio, I have no more room.
And that stops the conversation about someone potentially putting an AV on that property. Part of Kirby's government.
Unless they're converting a garage and then you have the parking.
Existing, yeah, okay, all right, makes sense, gotcha.
So, I think we've pretty much covered all the issues. I think one of the things we need to do is give Mike some direction as to what do we want the bulk standards to be? Do we want height restrictions? Do we want setback, you know, adhere to the setback restrictions that exist now?
I would say definitely with the setbacks. I think it should basically meet all the requirements if you're going to be putting up another structure on your property anyway. Just additional, right? You gotta come up with, you know, the deed restrictions and.
Well, once again, we don't have to allow new construction.
I would say just conversion
Existing
of
footprint.
existing.
Right.
I'm moving towards that.
of
Yeah,
existing.
the room is one of the issues. How about, and we could draft something that says, look, you can't build something and come back a year later and say.
Yeah, well, then I was
That's
thinking
what I
that,
was just gonna say, because that's what's gonna happen.
I'm gonna build a nice sized garage, and then after I get my CO for that, I'm gonna.
Or another family room with a little deck and your separate entrance,
But again,
whatever, and all of a sudden.
there's the abuse of that, then there's potentially the honest use of that. I built the garage, hey, my mom needs medical attention now, hey, and what, you draw a line there? Do you, do you not? I don't know, you know, so.
That's that,
But we have to
that's.
make sure it's not being abused.
A height requirement could be, Mike, what do you think, no more than half the,
Well, if it's existing,
No more than-
would it be changed?
No,
Well,
no, no, it shouldn't be
the
one
garage-
story. This is not supposed
No,
to
it
be
should be
another
one.
house.
It should be 10 to 12
Yeah.
foot.
However, if you have an existing structure.
That's what I'm saying, I don't want to put a maximum, if you have a garage that's,
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know,
there's-
17 feet, like, you know, his garage.
You could do that for new, you could say that the height requirements for new, however, if you're rehabilitating an existing, you can exceed it by.
There are a lot of houses in my block that have two-story garages, which are old carriage houses.
What about a minimum lot size? Does that address some of these concerns?
If it meets the impervious coverage and setbacks and parking, then
Yeah,
does the lot size matter, or?
10,000 square feet.
Well,
That's
typically the
all right.
larger lot can
It's
address
around one.
parking and most of these concerns with improvement coverage, right? It's the small lots that become the challenge.
What is the smallest conforming lot in R2?
I think you need 50 wide.
I think it's 6,000.
I think you need a 50 wide, I know that. So, 5,500 would be 5,000.
It's got to be at least 6,000.
I mean,
This conforming lot.
I'm just throwing it out that
That falls into
sometimes they can
And
address
all we have
parking.
to do is say it needs to be a
Conforming
conforming
lot.
lot.
I like that.
Yeah.
Throw that in there.
I know when we built the Habitat house on Second Street, Habitat got a variance because it was only a 30-foot lot, and it had no value. So they put the Habitat house there, and it's still standing, it's in great shape, so that, that's an undersized lot. There's a vacant lot on Gaston Avenue, that's an undersized lot.
Yeah.
And all the houses on my street, and I would bet someone Davenport Street, near the school, they're probably too narrow as well, but they're all existing.
Yeah, I think we should put in there a line for it has to be.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable
Yeah.
approach. And I think that
You should meet all the
conversion
setbacks and
of
everything.
an existing structure.
I prefer to just do conversion of an existing.
How does the borough involve with tax assessment?
That's the tax assessor's problem.
Well, I'm just wondering, do we need to
Well,
get
it's
from them
it's
ahead
living
of time or
space.
after?
It's living space, it'll be calculated as
Yeah.
whatever the value is.
But is there a way to get it involved beforehand, understand? Should we be talking to them first to say, what would you do if we did this? Where's that garage?
Why does that matter?
What did-
From a
what-
zoning perspective?
Well, I think it makes a difference because the person who's gonna either go to build this needs to know that this is also not a freebie. Maybe it makes it even more expensive to have it as
Oh, it will.
standalone unit.
Well, it will. Yeah,
That's
well,
even
it will.
restricted, what I'm.
You could say it's recommended that, we can't require it. You would think somebody coming in wanting to do that would think to do that first before they undertook it. We can make a notation, it's recommended that someone go and speak with whoever's looking to do this, or speaks with the tax assessor, find out education, something like that, to point them to it. No, I agree with you. They
I
should know
just
they're
think, I
getting
just
themselves
think
into.
this is a lot of moving parts, financial moving parts that people are gonna be upset with on the back end.
Larry, you just don't want somebody to do all this work to get
Yeah.
an increase in
And then,
tax bill.
well,
that-
it's
They
gonna
weren't
be either
expecting.
create a
Right.
tax bill, or it's gonna end up being, we're gonna get it anyway. Meaning that, then my neighbor has a nice garage next door, they don't put the car in next to it. Sure they can put a bathroom in there, I bet you they can run gas line back there. They can run that. Say, for the grandmother, okay, we'll go with that. For now. 2 years from now, grandma's gone to a better place, and now Dave is living in there. The tax assessor finds out about it, or the code enforcement says, hey, what are you doing? Okay, never mind. Go ahead, we're just gonna raise your tax. It's gonna, once this is done, I don't see it getting undone.
Well, and-
I don't see anybody going and going, I'm gonna remove the kitchen.
You're saying it becomes an enforcement issue then?
Yes, yes, yes,
Well, it's always going to be an enforcement issue.
yes.
And there's no way around that.
No, it's gotta be registered, it's like the non-owner occupied rentals we have now.
Well, restrict. Whoever
Is everyone registered?
needs to get permits.
Yeah. And you need permits for it anyway.
Part of the permit process is to register that as an ADU.
And probably have it inspected to make sure it's still functioning as a.
Right.
If there's a daycare center back there, we got an issue.
I don't think we get inspected on a regular basis.
Something to say.
Well, what you're actually gonna need then is some sort of proof from the person that's living there, because it's an ADU, yeah, sure, but, who's it? Who's that?
I know with a reverse mortgage, I have a friend who just got one, he has to sign an affidavit with the mortgage company every year that he still lives in the house. Or maybe something that the owner has to certify or
Like you're
attest,
saying there's no-
that, it's a grandma flat and grandma is still a
So the
family.
honor system is-
It's still a family, and then you sign it, and,
Yeah.
well, unfortunately, yeah. And most people are honorable, but I mean.
No, I hear you.
We know that the cracks are wide sometimes and things fall through. But I'm sure there's ways, we're not the first community to explore this. And we've got great, great legal and planning minds to my left there. They'll walk us through the minefield, so to speak.
And you know what, too, you got neighbors, and that's all.
Yeah,
of course.
You're gonna see, there's
Of
sometimes
course.
that's watchdogs, and when there's a problem, and there's no parking, and there's, parties going on back there by somebody that should be living there.
Grandma.
Yeah.
Problem.
Sunday morning bingo, yeah. No, I think it's needed, but it's gotta be, it's gotta fit.
Right.
It's like anything else, it's gotta be,
Where it can fit.
it's gotta
We have
fit.
to be careful too about character of our neighborhoods. We
Right.
work hard to get it at this point in time. We don't want to.
Kind of fit the fabric of the
Yeah,
community.
right, yeah, that's the other thing.
Not become an
Yeah.
overwhelming car issue and the rest of it on streets.
Tony, what were you going to say?
Rental registration, they register their property, they're inspected when a new tenant comes in, and only when a new tenant comes in. That tenant goes out 5 years from now, then it's inspected. It's on the homeowner to call for inspection.
Out of curiosity, with that, an AD, are these gonna be considered rentals? 'Cause, I mean, you know, grandma's staying with me, but she's not paying, is that a rental?
You're mean.
I'm-
They hurt your grandma.
No, I said she's not, I'm saying she's not paying, she's not paying, so is that a rental?
It wasn't
I think Tony's saying maybe look at it the same way as a rental, or
Yeah.
maybe.
And I'm saying, I think we need to make sure it's in there, because that's an easy, oh, I'm not charging, you know, Joey to live back there, it's not a rental.
It's still not owner occupied.
Yeah.
But we could
It's family.
adopt the same requirements and put them in the ordinance for these as we do for rental.
I think that's a good idea.
When it's in an existing house, where you have a kitchen and in-laws living, that's not registered as a rental.
Right, and I'm aware of at least one ADU in the borough of Somerville that was built into a garage. Separate entrance. And it's obviously a small unit,
Yeah.
but it was for somebody's mother. There's nobody in there now.
How was that couched at the time?
I have no idea.
We're not gonna
It
discuss.
was done before my time.
It just is.
How do you get home?
Like 99% of the sheds in Somerville, they're not adhering to the 5 and 10 foot setback. If we did that, there would be a line of people from here to the courthouse and beyond complaining. They just appeared, and
Right.
we live with them, and it's not really a problem.
So I think we could come up with something that meets all those and, you know, restricted that, and we can look at that again.
So I think what I would like to do is have Karen and Mike do something like this, a summary of the situations that are allowed, and what the standards are, if there are no standards, and without allowing new construction, I think we've eliminated a lot of the issues raised by this. So for our next meeting, if we have time to do it then, we'll do it then. Otherwise, the first opportunity we get, we'll go back into it. I don't think there's a need to rush this.
No, I don't want to rush.
Colin, do you have anything to contribute?
I've got lots to contribute, but not a lot to say, but you've got to take into account when you're working through this, population is getting older, not younger. You and I and the mayor are pretty good representatives of that. And
Thanks.
you're going to have to take into account that some of the younger people, like the two sitting over here, may have to look after parents or other relatives in the not too distant future. So if it's going to be... I'm going to come and live in the case.
That's an ATA issue.
So you're going to deed restrict it, and I think that gives you the control. There's no new construction. But you can't just say we're going to ruin the character of the existing area, because it's changing anyhow. So that's my bit.
And every family situation is different.
There's always a time for change, though. You don't want the change to happen too quickly, or of course you could ruin a neighborhood.
Change is always with this camp.
Yeah.
It is, but it may come before you want it to come, though, Colin.
Oh, it's done that too, come on. Why have you got short back and sides? You know?
And every family situation is different. When my folks got older, we talked about, getting into family and letting them, come and live with us, and my father said, no way.
Yeah.
He didn't want, not that he didn't want to be near me. But he
But he didn't want to
Going
be that
down
close.
He wanted
I
to
could
not
see
be
that
above
one
or
mile
below me.
He's a wise man.
He was happy living 4 blocks away.
This is taking it out of right here.
No,
Is this judiciary?
yeah. So,
Okay.
I had, get in charge.
I don't have any comments other than if you haven't been to the train station, go. See
yes,
what's going on.
tomorrow night, by the way.
But you've all been
Indulge
invited.
me.
Yeah.
You're all invited tomorrow's 5
Not all of you have responded,
Well,
I did.
so if you haven't responded, we'll tell you what.
if I could just remark for the camera, tomorrow night is a fairly historic night here in Somerville. We're cutting the ribbon at 5 p.m. for the bulky part of the train station project south of the tracks. And Bernie, correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably the largest owner-occupied residential opportunity in Somerville since the Gaston Avenue track was built in the late 50s, early 60s. We're adding 156 owner-occupied.
No, you can't say owner-occupied.
Well, they're owned.
Well, there's a for rent sign up already.
Ideally, owner-occupied and owned, which is key, units. And despite the rising cost of construction, the pre-sales are pretty strong.
They've sold, what is it, 60?
I heard 55 to 60, so over a third of them already have been sold just on a diagram. So that's encouraging, but we've worked hard on this board and other boards, council as well, to create various kinds of housing opportunity. And this is the first, non-tenant, opportunity to buy something. So if you want to sell your house and still have equity in something and not have to cut grass and trim trees and clean gutters, this will give you that opportunity. If you want to rent something, there's ample space available too. But I want to thank you all for what you did to get us to this point. And if you haven't been down there in recently, 2 weeks ago, we had our congressman and our secretary of transportation there, and they were in awe of what they saw. Because you don't see it from the north side of the track. You have to actually go on the platform, and you see the expanse of it. And it's. I've been out the last week talking to homeowners that are new to the town. 78 homes have sold since the first of the year. So there's opportunity and interest there. And this is just one other opportunity for a housing choice. So I again thank you all for the hours that we collectively put into getting it to this point. If you're available 5 o'clock tomorrow night, just come down and we're going to have tours of them as well. So some of the graybeards here that are perhaps looking to sell in the not too distant future can put a bid in on a nice corner unit.
Except younger guys?
Not yet. You got plenty of snow to shovel yet.
I think it's something, I think my beard's getting dry.
No, it's, again, I think the last tract of land that you could own something on your own, except for the little condos on Bridge Street and on Cliff Street there, was the Gaston Avenue tract when those car streets were built. Really hasn't been much added to our inventory, and this is just another sign of progress and also interest and opportunity in the town. So I'm excited about it, and I hope you can come in and participate. We all have some ownership in that.
Good, thank you. At this time, I will open the meeting up to the public. Since the only public here has already said something, I will close the public session. Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
We just go on the record that the planning board is authorizing a board attorney, a board planner, and engineer to do a report on this more extensive.
We need a motion to do that.
Right.
So moved.
We'll take a second. We've got 2 motions on the floor. We'll table the first motion made to adjourn and vote on this one.
Freddie Nevada.
Yes.
Dennis Sullivan.
Yes.
Jane Greer.
Yes.
Artie Davis. mean, I'm sorry, Art Akins, Jason Kraska,
Yes.
Al Caressi.
Yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Yes.
Christopher Addick.
Yes.
And others.
Yes.
Okay, now, all those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Do it?
Thank you tomorrow.
One of them is